Welcome back, folks, to the random video blog where I, Graham Giuseppe Matthews, give my rambling thoughts in the world of wrestling, share a few stories, etc., etc. Now that we're only 2 days away, 48 hours until WWE's Night of Champions pay-per-view, I thought I would make this week's edition of the video blog Night of Champions themed by counting down my top 5 favorite Night of Champions matches in WWE history. Now, brief little story for you. I'll save all the plugs till the end, but I will say this, though. All my reviews of Night of Champions from 2007 to 2013 are already up here on the channel. I reviewed them in WrestleRant last fall, so be sure to check those out at your leisure. But quick story before we get down to the rankings. Night of Champions, when I first started watching wrestling, was my favorite pay-per-view of the year. Don't ask me why. I think it just might have had something to do with the theme, with the specialness of every title being on the line. Now, nowadays, it's not really saying much because we don't have that many championships. Back in 08, we had like 9 titles in the entire company. Now we only have 4 or 5. So it's not really as special as it once was. But still, I enjoy Night of Champions. Not traditionally a great show, but I am looking forward to Sunday nevertheless. So, still, watching all these Night of Champions shows back in recent days, last year as well, wanted to revisit my top 5 favorite Night of Champions matches of all time. So coming in at number 5 is from 2011, actually 4 years ago today on September 18th, 2011, coincidentally enough, for the World Heavyweight Championship, Randy Orton versus Mark Henry. Now, the match itself is no technical masterpiece, so don't go out of your way to watch this match just because I told you that it was an instant classic. It's not. It succeeded where it lacked in terms of technical wrestling. It succeeded where that made up for in storytelling. I thought they told a great story. Mark Henry going into Night of Champions was on an absolute roll. This was in the midst of his Hall of Pain run, and Randy Orton had just won the belt back at SummerSlam from Christian in that no-holds-barred match against Christian at SummerSlam 2011. And leading into this, Mark Henry had gotten the better of Randy Orton, I believe, every single week, which led me to believe, oh shit, Randy Orton's going to win and they're going to squash Henry's momentum. But they didn't do that. They did not do that at all. Mark Henry dominated a majority of this match. They told a very good story with Randy Orton battling back and trying to overcome the odds, only to fall short of victory, going for the RKO, Mark Henry just picking him up. And you thought he was going to hit the RKO out of nowhere, but he missed. Henry picks him up for a World's Strongest Slam to get the 1-2-3, a clean victory to win his first ever and only World Heavyweight Championship. It was an amazing moment. The place goes nuts. He cuts a promo afterwards to turn those same fans against them, saying, "None of y'all deserve this. This is my moment. I ain't sharing it with none of you." It was an amazing promo, a great moment, and very well deserved for the World's Strongest Man. Which is saying a lot. The only highlight on that show, I mean, I've said it before, I love the year of 2011, but that year, I mean, it was kind of shitty at the beginning, but that year, to me, really went to shit with this pay-per-view. The WWE title match with Cena and Del Rio, in my personal opinion, that one match ruined Del Rio. He won a few titles after that, was never the same. When he lost to Cena on that show, he was fucking ruined and never the same after that point. Just my personal opinion. The Divas title match, Beth Phoenix losing in her hometown of Buffalo to Kelly, completely unnecessary, ruined the moment. And then, of course, the infamous main event between CM Punk and Triple H. Some people will even tell you that the match was good, the outcome was shit. I'm the kind of person that will tell you the outcome was shit and the match was shit. Not just because CM Punk lost, it was just completely overbooked with so much interference and all this fucking bullshit with Kevin Nash and John Laurinaitis and The Miz and Awesome Truth. You never really had that second to enjoy the match because everyone was getting involved at every single second of it, and they were both baby faces. So there was no point to it. They were trying to make CM Punk win. They were trying to make Triple H win. It was a complete fucking waste, and the match was trash. Having CM Punk's white-hot momentum come to an end on that show was a complete waste of time. So I don't mean to go off on a tangent here, but I'm just saying if you do watch that show from 4 years ago today, coincidentally enough, be sure to only check out that World Heavyweight title match between Mark Henry and Randy Orton. Up next on the list is from last year's installment, Night of Champions 2014. Pretty good show in comparison to some past installments of the pay-per-view. I thought it was a good show. I'll probably watch it back at some point this weekend, if only for this one match between Randy Orton and Chris Jericho. Now, unlike the previous match where Orton faced Henry in 2011, this didn't really have much of a story behind it. Jericho had just wrapped up his feud with Bray Wyatt. A lot of people thought they were going to conclude that feud on this show. They didn't. Bray Wyatt won the steel cage match on Raw. It wasn't even on this pay-per-view, so that was a mind-fucking-boggling decision. So instead, they rushed him into an instant feud with Randy Orton. going into the pay-per-view by having Randy Orton make some comment backstage about Jericho. I don't know, they just started the feud backstage randomly after that match with Wyatt, and they, bam, have a match at the pay-per-view. It was a complete, they just made it out of nowhere. But I didn't complain because I had always really wanted to see Orton and Jericho face off on pay-per-view. Now, they had faced off once before, Armageddon 2007, with those same exact roles, Jericho as the babyface, Orton as the heel. But they teased the feud that one time in 2010, almost exactly 5 years ago, when Orton had punted Jericho in the head, made him leave the company. I mean, Jericho was on his way out anyway. Jericho was gone from the company for a year and a half, and he never really got his revenge on Jericho. He never did. They were going to do the feud in 2012. Jericho got suspended. Orton got suspended, so they never did the feud. So it was cool to see them revisit it on this show. They mentioned the punt thing. But anyway, not only that, where they kind of... the story kind of lacked, complete opposite from the previous match. They produced a very good in-ring action, produced a lot of very good in-ring action in this match, and produced a great matchup. I thought it was very, very good. These guys have great chemistry with one another. Orton and Jericho, in my personal opinion, having one of the better matches on that show. And surprisingly, along with the Divas title match, which was also very underrated, between AJ Lee Page and I believe Nikki Bella, the Cesaro-Sheamus match was exceptional as well. But I thought this match was great too. Jericho's final match with the company, so much like in 2010, his final match for his second run of the company was with Orton. Same thing with this time around. His final match with the company was with Randy Orton. So a very good match. Hits the RKO out of nowhere after Jericho goes up for the, some crossbody or something. I don't know. You're never really supposed to think what these people are going for, but he's going for some sort of aerial maneuver. Orton hits the RKO out of nowhere for the victory. And in my opinion, this was kind of the point in time where Orton really started to make me a fan of his again. I'll be writing an article about this hopefully at some point in the near future, but this was around the time that Orton really started to win me over again. I was so happy to see him turn heel in 2013, but it went nowhere. That heel run was complete shit because he was booked like shit. He was booked like shit when he was world champion. Afterwards, he was a complete afterthought in the Evolution reunion, which was cool, but Orton himself individually was not booked very well at all. So it was great to see him kind of get back on a roll with this matchup, beating Jericho clean, having a great matchup here and getting the crowd on his side, kind of like feeding off the crowd and kind of teasing that tweener turn that we would get in the weeks to come. And eventually when he came back from storyline injury in early 2015. So this was kind of the turning point for me that kind of made me look at Orton in a different light and like, hey, this guy's pretty cool again. I mean, I loved him in 2009, but then I jumped off the bandwagon in maybe late 2010, early 2011 after I think he beat Christian for the World Heavyweight Championship. That's when I was like, I fucking hate Randy Orton. But no, not really to that extent. But this was a great match. Definitely check it out from last year's Night of Champions pay-per-view. So going forward here for number 3 on my list, on my top 5 favorite Night of Champions matches of all time, the Six-Pack Challenge from 2010's installment of Night of Champions, featuring Randy Orton contending for the gold along with John Cena, Wade Barrett, Edge, Chris Jericho against the champion Sheamus. Again, a third straight Orton match in a row. I'm on an Orton high this week, but I promised you I made this list a couple weeks ago. But Orton's been in a lot of great matches that Night of Champions, so you can't fault him for that. And I really love this match. So I've told this story before. I don't know if I've told it here on the YouTube channel before, but Night of Champions 2010 was only the second pay-per-view I ever ordered. The first one being Royal Rumble 2010 that same year. And Night of Champions 2010 was, of course, that September. And I really wanted to buy SummerSlam 2010, but I was on vacation. Didn't really work out. And I never really, my mom said that she would get me something, for an end-of-the-year school thing. And although it was 3 months later, I said, hey, I still have, that thing I want to cash in on here. And she was kind of reluctant, but we bought the pay-per-view because, I could record it too. The excuse was that I was going to save it for my brother, and he would want to watch it too, so it's kind of worth the money. And I did have it on DVR for several years until, we moved, and I lost the recording, whatever. And then, of course, we have the network now. I bought it on DVD for $4 on Amazon. But anyway, I loved that show. Not only because of the nostalgia of sitting there watching it live on pay-per-view, but just because it was a great show. The crowd was awesome. It was in Chicago that year, well before the Money in the Bank pay-per-view in 2011. That was the show that kind of turned me on to the Chicago crowd and was made me think, wow, these guys are an awesome audience. Of course, they've always been a great wrestling crowd, but that was the show for me that kind of made me realize that they've always been awesome. But a lot of good matches on that show, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in this list. But the main event, I thought was great. I mean, the in-ring action early on was kind of all over the place, which is to be expected when you have 6 men in the ring at the same time. But the elimination aspect of it really enhanced it for me. I mean, if it was just 6 people, it's going to be a massive clusterfuck. But the elimination stipulation for me was what made it more suspenseful. Jericho just out of nowhere getting eliminated. Some people will say that he got buried. Whatever, it really added something to the feud, or added something to the matchup, rather, because after he got pinned, I don't know, maybe by Cena or something, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was Cena. I gotta watch it back. I'm gonna be watching it back either tomorrow or tonight or Sunday or something. I'll be watching it back this weekend, so I'll be able to tell you for sure on Twitter. But at some point in this match, I think very early on, Jericho was the first one gone. He gets eliminated, and the whole crowd is they're stunned, just sitting there stunned. Everyone in the matchup just stands there frozen like, holy shit, Jericho's gone that quickly. And it wasn't really a stipulation, but Jericho had made it very well known in the past that had he lost this match, if he failed to win the WWE Championship on this show, he would leave the company. Of course, he would not follow up on that claim. He would leave the company, I think, 8 days later, like I said, in that match with Orton, where he just got punted in the head. So, they never really ended up following up with that. They mentioned it. The commentators mentioned it. They didn't really mention it. They kind of kept on going back and forth on whether the stipulation was true. Ultimately, it was not, but still, that was a shocking elimination to see Jericho go so early. Edge played his role well. I think he was the next one gone after Jericho, which was to be expected again because they were not the main guys in the WWE title storyline at that time. The Nexus got involved. Helped Wade Barrett eliminate John Cena, which was a huge thing for him. Ended up coming down to Sheamus and Orton in the end. Ended up coming down to those two, and they had a great back and forth. The crowd was into it. Didn't give too much away going into their Hell in a Cell match at Hell in a Cell 2010, which I also thought was probably the best match these two ever had. I mean, 5 years down the line in 2015, I just vomit at the thought of an Orton-Sheamus match, not because I dislike either guy, but because we've seen the match so many times in the last 5-6 years. Unlike this matchup where it was still fresh in 2010 for a time anyway, and they had a great back and forth to close the match. Orton hits the RKO, wins the WWE Championship. The place goes fucking nuts. And I love watching this show, specifically this match, watching it back. And I've said this time and time again. I said it in my review of the show last year, and I've just said it on Twitter and stuff. Orton was so over in 2010. When he turned babyface and he was like that tweener guy, I mean, he's kind of the same character now, and that's what I love about Orton in 2015, that he's kind of the same character that he was in 2010, but in 2010, he was this badass dude. No one wanted to, no one wanted to fuck with him because that guy was going to beat the shit out of you. He was just on an absolute tear. Whether you were a babyface, a heel, an authority figure, it didn't fucking matter. He was going to beat the shit out of you regardless. And he really had that Stone Cold Steve Austin-like persona about him. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, he's the next Stone Cold. He was the next Stone Cold. We say that about everyone who flips people off and, takes off their armbands and stuff. We say that about everybody. But in 2010, he reminded me of a Stone Cold Steve Austin-like tweener character. And that's what I loved about Randy Orton that year. And, of course, like I said, when he beat Christian for the world title, he kind of started to lose his luster a little bit for me, and he wasn't as good as he once was. And it wasn't until this year, or late last year, when I started to become a Randy Orton fan again. But yeah, I thought, this was a very, very good match. A great moment with Randy Orton after such a long time reclaiming the WWE title, returning to glory with this title win. So a very good match that I thoroughly enjoyed. Should we get to match number 2 on my list, my second favorite Night of Champions match of all time? It is, let me just double check here and make sure I'm not, fucking on my list here. From the 2012 installment, John Cena versus CM Punk. Now again, a very good pay-per-view. I think I embellished a little bit too much when I at the end of 2012, I was saying, oh, this is the greatest pay-per-view of this year. Wouldn't go so far to say that, but it was a pretty awesome show. Watching it back, it wasn't amazing, but at that time, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. I think you had 2 title changes. Eve won the Divas title, and that was also the night that Team Hell No won their first tag team titles, and they officially formed and won the belts. So a lot of good matches. Even Sheamus and Del Rio on that show I thought was pretty good. And that feud was a bore too, but at least at that period in time, they were still producing pretty good matches, so I wasn't going to shit on it. So they had a pretty good match on that show. But easily the best and the most well-wrestled match in that entire show was John Cena and CM Punk. Now, I'm not just putting this match so high on the list because I'm a huge fan of their feud from 2011. Just these two never ceased to have amazing chemistry. They had amazing matches in 2011, 2012, and in the early part of 2013, their final match ever together on that episode of Raw and the number one contenders match before WrestleMania. You know this story. Probably the best wrestle match they ever had, even better than Money in the Bank, which I thought had a better story, but that match was better wrestled. Anyway, because those matches are so great, the one from Money in the Bank 2011, the one from SummerSlam of that same year, and that one on Raw right before WrestleMania 29. Like I said, the last match they ever contested against each other before Punk left the company last year. This match tends to get overlooked more often than not because it's kind of stuck there right in the middle, and I thought it was an awesome match, as expected, as you would expect from these two. CM Punk was the heel going in, and he was one of the longest-reigning WWE champions in modern history, and he was trying to break that reign, and Cena was in his hometown. I mean, the crowd didn't really like him very much, but they were in his home turf of Boston, and that kind of played into his favor, and I had a legitimate concern they were going to put the belt on him here, much like they did with Del Rio the year prior. Thankfully, they did not do that. They did tease putting the belt on him. He pinned Punk for the 1-2-3. I'm like, oh, fuck, no. I was so mad. And then they reversed the decision after it was revealed that the shoulders of both men were on the mat. Therefore, it was a draw. Punk still your WWE champion. So, for some people, kind of a flat finish, but they didn't want to beat Cena. He was still involved in the title chase. I mean, I think he got hurt in this match, but, originally he was supposed to go up against Punk at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. And then at the Night of Champions, they didn't want to beat Cena. Obviously, weren't going to beat Punk and end the reign so prematurely, so they had to do a fuck finish. It's better than a DQ. That's really all I could say, so it was kind of original in that sense. Didn't really have a major problem with it. I was just happy that Punk retained the title, and everything that came before it was awesome. Just a typical great match between Punk and Cena. Was it like the third best match they ever had? I mean, I don't know if I would call it their third. Number one being Money in the Bank just because of the story and everything else riding on that match. Two being the one from Raw in early 2013, and the third probably being the SummerSlam match. You can rank this one above that one. It really doesn't matter. They're all interchangeable because they're all awesome, but this was a very good match in its own right that often, like I said earlier, gets overlooked for some of their more memorable encounters. So we get to match number one on my list, my favorite Night of Champions match of all time. Now, this is saying a lot. This is covering a lot of ground because Night of Champions has been around since 2007. There's been a lot of matches that take place at this pay-per-view over the years, over the last 8 years. And this is my favorite, hands down, you can't convince me otherwise, my favorite match in the event's history. From the 2010 installment, Daniel Bryan versus The Miz for the United States Championship. Now, there is a bit of a backstory to this, and I talked about this before when in one of my video blogs last year, and you'll get it, a reason why in a second. But shortly before the event, not even shortly, like a month and a half before the event, Daniel Bryan was still fired from the company. He did not come back until SummerSlam. But it was revealed that he was going to be attending the indie promotion that I regularly attend, Northeast Wrestling, hands down the greatest indie promotion you will ever go to. Like, I mean, there's some great wrestling in some other promotions. This promotion is not only known for its very good wrestling, but the stars they bring in. They fucking go all out. We're going to their 20th anniversary show, John and I, just a few short months in November, and that's going to be the greatest show I ever go to, and I'll tell you that at a later date. I've talked about it on Twitter and Facebook, whatever. But anyway, getting back to the story here. In early August, they announced that at the show in October, they would be having Daniel Bryan, former WWE superstar. I'm thinking, wow, this is really cool. Former WWE guy, got to go to the show to go meet him. Little did I know that about a couple weeks after that, he would return to the company, and because he made that commitment to going to that indie show, to going to that Northeast Wrestling show, he would stick to that commitment. He was gonna be finishing out his indie shows. I don't know if this was his last one, but I'm fairly certain it was one of his final indie shows ever, because he was, already back in the company. He had returned 2 months earlier, and it wasn't going to be happening until early October. So not only was it going to be cool that we were going to be going to the show and meeting Daniel Bryan, what made it even cooler was that in Night of Champions, which also took place before the indie show that we were going to, Daniel Bryan was going to be in contention for the U.S. title against The Miz. Now, Miz was his pro from NXT Season 1 many months earlier, which they kind of resumed the feud when Daniel Bryan came back. And Miz, for his entire run in WWE, Daniel Bryan's entire run in WWE, treated Bryan like shit, just bullying him and beating the crap out of him. Daniel Bryan trying to fight back. And he did fight back at some points. They had a brief match on Raw in like May of that year that kind of gets forgotten about. But it was a pretty decent match, and people didn't really look at that as Miz getting his comeuppance because it didn't lead to anything. Because Daniel Bryan later joined the Nexus, and of course, if that went as planned and he didn't get a release, very likely, more often than not, more likely than not, we would not have gotten this match in Night of Champions. So everything happened for a reason, as I like to say. But anyway, when Daniel Bryan came back, he did resume his feud with The Miz going into this U.S. title match in Chicago, the same place where he, just built his career, essentially. Chicago, a very smarky crowd, a very wrestling-oriented crowd. And Daniel Bryan, that's where he, cut his teeth, whatever the phrase is. That's pretty much where he kind of honed his skills as a professional wrestler in Chicago. Not primarily, but that was one of the many towns where Ring of Honor was popular in. But anyway, the crowd was very much behind Daniel Bryan, not just because, he's an NXT guy from NXT Season 1, don't really care about him. That's not the case at all. They very much built the feud very, very well going into this pay-per-view at Night of Champions. Very well built, with Alex Riley, who was still with The Miz at that period in time, in the corner of The Miz. And they had great chemistry. Bryan trying to battle back against the odds with Alex Riley in The Miz's corner in his match against Daniel Bryan. The crowd was just red hot for Daniel Bryan, and at various points trying to lock in the lapel lock. Miz, in my personal opinion, the best match he's ever had. And he's had some, people don't give Miz enough credit as a performer. He's not had like he hasn't had like a multitude of 5-star matches, but to his credit, not just because I'm a misfit, but to his credit, he has had a handful of good to great matches in his time with WWE. This one being one of, if not the greatest matches ever had with this company, and a great opponent in Daniel Bryan. And it made me sad, too, that we never really got more of this feud. They had a triple threat match at Hell in a Cell with John Morrison also involved at Hell in a Cell a few weeks later, which was also a very good match. They had a match on Raw in early 2011, like on the, I think it was the Valentine's Day episode, the same night that Raw came back. Again, a very good episode, or a very good match. A very good episode, too, but a very good match between those guys. And that was the last time they ever faced off. They might have had a match. Oh, no, they had a match earlier this year, too, that was also pretty good. From what I can recall, I'm pretty sure they had a match in early 2015. I remember he was on Miz TV, but I don't know if they had a match. I'm pretty sure they did. Anyway, so anyway, this match was awesome. Daniel Bryan, in the end, Alex Riley gets taken out at ringside. He locks in the lapel lock, very suspenseful. I'm just sitting on my couch like, come on, tap, tap, tap. And very, I love Miz, but I was pretty nervous that he was going to win on this show, so I was pretty, even though I was a huge fan of his, I really wanted to see Daniel Bryan win just because they could say that I met the United States champion at this house show, which was the weekend before the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, so there was no chance, or at least I didn't hope not, that he was going to lose this belt before that show. So anyway, he locks in the lapel lock. It feels like forever before he taps out. Miz finally taps. Place goes nuts. Daniel Bryan celebrating with his WWE Championship win. It's awesome. Just a very feel-good moment, and the place goes crazy, and I was so happy, and that was the moment where I became a Daniel Bryan fan. Even when I met him a couple weeks after that, which, again, I talked about here in the video blog last year on the 4-year anniversary of when I met him. He's awesome. Daniel Bryan is a very awesome dude. Very down-to-earth guy, very genuine. And it was so cool to be able to meet him as United States champion on that show. Only 2 weeks later, so easily my favorite Night of Champions match of all time. But now that I've given my list, I would love to hear from you guys. What are your favorite Night of Champions matches of all time? Was it John Morrison, Johnny Nitro, whatever you want to call him, versus CM Punk from 2007? Was it John Cena versus Brock Lesnar from 2014? Would love to know your list. Be sure to hit me up on Twitter at WrestleRant. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.Jason.Matthews. Or you can leave a comment on this very video in the comment section down below. Now time for my shameless plugs. Those were kind of plugs. But in regards to Night of Champions, though, as I mentioned at the start of the video, you can be sure to check out all of my reviews, with the exception of the 2014 installment, which I'll probably review at some point down the line. But for right now, it's not up. From 2007 to 2013, my reviews of Night of Champions are already up here on the channel on my WrestleRant video series from last fall, so go back in the archives to check out those. My written reviews of Night of Champions from 2011 onward, I think I wrote about the 2010 show in like a Bleacher Report article. I got to double check, but I feel like I did. That's probably up my Bleacher Report profile somewhere. That's harder to find, but my reviews of Night of Champions 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014, all in written form, up on nexteraWrestling.net. Just type in Night of Champions 2011 in the search bar at the top of the page, and you can go straight to my review and get my moments at the time of that show on the website. And finally, kind of also in relation to that, this Sunday, going to try to do live coverage of the pay-per-view. I'll probably be watching the show with RJ or something. So, I'm going to be, getting food and stuff. So I don't know if I'll be up to date with my coverage, but I'm going to try. So be sure to, Check up on Twitter and all my social media pages for more updates on that. But I'm going to try to do live coverage of the pay-per-view as it's happening, only on nextairwrestling.net. Last but not least, be sure to check out, everything else on this channel. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. The pay-per-view weekends are always stacked. I'm going to the movies tomorrow. Hopefully, you guys are doing something cool as well. I'm going to be hanging out tonight, watching all Night of Champions pay-per-views, working on articles, and so on and so forth. Hopefully, you guys enjoy your weekend. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch you guys down the road.